Okay, well,
Got windows open.
guess we should introduce ourselves. Hello, everybody, who's in the room. Welcome to our third webinar. I'm Curtis Jung.
And I'm Rick Sinclair.
I want to say
working through our technical issues. Not going to worry about that.
All right. I think we are ready to roll. Today's topic, we'll be covering adding some articles to your Central Station 3. Articles would be defined as turnout signals, uncouplers, multi-decoder devices like an M83 and an M84. For those of you who are old timers, this is the equivalent to a K83 and a K84. Let's see.
Yeah.
You may, things may run a little slowly because we're a little scattered and have to look through various windows to figure out who's sending us messages.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, which is good.
All right. Yeah, I think.
Once you're ready there, are we recording?
Yeah, we are. We are actually on live on YouTube right now.
Okay.
And we aren't really recording. Rick wants to know what you're drinking.
That is ice water.
We can't do these spot ads. Sponsored by. All right. So you want to do? You want to start or kick us off?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like Curtis said, we're going to be adding articles to the article list of your CS3. And I need to share my screen. I need to be the host to share the screen, apparently, or co-host.
Let's see. Share screen. All panelists. Okay. We can start sharing when someone else is sharing. Okay. We have full control of. You should have now be able to share your screen.
Yes. So here we have the CS3 screen. This is, as you get it out of the box, this is the default track plan. We will get into track planning later. We have to get articles in the article list before we can start doing the track plan. So that's why we're going in this order. Hopefully eventually get you up to basic routing in these webinars. So I'm going to add a turnout. It already has some turnouts in it and signals, but I'm going to be adding a turnout and a signal actually.
So, hey, Rick, excuse me. Do you have a way of, is Lawrence, can you just reply, is my volume too loud or does Rick need to turn his up?
I don't know that
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you can turn yours up. I'll have to turn mine down a little bit. I know I could definitely be louder. Hopefully
I have to invest in a microphone is what I need to do. Maybe.
He actually asked if you can turn yours down. Oh, yours is too loud is what he's saying.
Oh, it's too loud?
Yeah.
Well, I'll speak softly. Okay. So going to be adding an article right now. First, it's going to be a turnout. What you want to do is first you want to get the turnout installed get the turnout decoder and motor installed into the turnout, and then all you have to do is plug it into your layout. I actually didn't go through that process. I just have a turnout decoder plugged into my layout just for demonstration purposes. I have set the dip switches according to the manual. Always check the manual for the address you want to set your dip switches to. The CS3 does tell you, but it's a little bit hard, not hard to find, but it'll be quicker if you just go by the table in the manual. Because there is already 5 articles in the article list as it came as a default. The 2 signals take up 2 addresses. So I'm going to be starting with address number 8 in the article, because I didn't want to delete these. I wanted this to look like the way you got it from your right out of the box. If you want to just test, this is a good way to do it, and you can always redo it or move it around, whatever. So I'll just add to this list, basically, is what I'm saying. So I made sure that my turnout dip switches were set to address 8 on my turnout decoder. Address 8 corresponds to dip switch number 4 on. So I've already done that. And what I can do now is I'm going to go to edit. And because this is an MFX turnout decoder, I've already set the dip switches. It's really easy. All I have to do is scroll down to discover MFX items. This window will ask, once it finds this item, if you want to get a new address or if you want to keep the address that you've assigned it. And right now, I want to keep it as address 8, even though it would assign it 8. Demonstration purposes, I'm going to keep this address and click OK.
Before we get off of that topic, though, sometimes getting a new address is an easier choice because you do have to remember to set those dip switches prior to going through that option. Does that make sense? I can show you when we do the M83.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get back to that, folks.
Now, if it's not MFX, this feature won't work. You can see it scrolling through it, found the MFX turnout, and it already put it in my keyboard up in the article list. And lo and behold, if I had a turnout motor and a turnout installed, it would be changing right now.
I can show you when we do the M83.
That's basically it. When you have a dip switch decoder, it would be an old installation decoder. You would have to add article, and then you select what you're adding, turnout, and it gives you the next default address down at the bottom in the center, which would be 9. I don't want to use 9. This is if we are adding a non-MFX decoder. Now, because I want to add a signal next, and I believe it's going to take 2 addresses, I'm just going to go up and say it's going to be address 15. I can change the name to whatever I want. I'll just go T space 15. That'll be turnout 15 on the layout. I can scroll through the tabs of different items, but being this is a turnout, I will call it a right-hand turnout. And then I click the edit, and there's T15 as a right-hand turnout. So basically, it's that simple to add turnouts, turnout decoders. I have a signal also. I will plug it into the track real quick. And the signal is going to be the same procedure. Because it is MFX, this happens to be a semaphore signal. Once again, it's going to be exactly the same. Discover MFX items. I want to keep this address. I'll click OK. And the central station will go look for a new MFX device on the layout. It detected a new decoder. And now it's just loading the information because I've already set the dip switches to this address, address number 9. Once this is done, And you can add multiple items, but we kind of recommend adding one at a time, maybe two at a time. That way you don't get confused. You can test it, make sure it works before you continue. This signal is actually on the layout and I can hear it changing. It's a semaphore signal. And to get into the all of the settings for it, I can change the name once again down here if I chose to, in the lower left. The protocol is Marklin Motorola. That's what I have it set as. It can be DCC also, but I have to change the dip switches. DC, I'm not entirely sure if it will register as an MFX device. So I keep everything Marklin Motorola. I can change the icon if I want, but I don't need to because it's MFX. It already loaded all the correct information into my article list. So once it's in here, it's in here. And that's all there is to it. So that's how simple it is to add articles to a Central Station 3. If Curtis, you want to get into this?
Yeah. Whatever, I'll take over. But let's kind of get some of these questions out of the way. Karach, he asked, does the turnout have to be part of the layout before adding? And is it supposed to show up on the layout? Technically, what happens is you can't actually add a turnout to the layout unless it's added in the article list first. Or the way it works is there are two paths that you can take. You can load the article first and add it into the article list as Rick has described, and then you can drag it into the layout. Or there's a method where you can add it into the layout, which will automatically place it in the article list.
Yes.
Joe asked, did you forget the dip switches beforehand for non-MFX decoders? So yeah, Joe, let me address that in my part of the presentation. But yes, there are dip switches is sort of, it gets a little confusing with the MFX devices, especially something like an MFX or an M83 or whatnot. And let me cover that when I go through the presentation. Robert, remember older decoders have a different coding scheme. Yes, that is true. Older K83s, K84s, you're going to find some switches on older devices only have 8 switches, even 4 on some really older decoders. But we don't really need to cover that on this. Let's see. Alan, you have a question regarding dip switches on locomotives. Let's kind of cover that after the topic is covered, and then maybe we can address it then. And so let me begin with the adding of a multi-decoder. So there's probably going to be a little bit of a difference between, I guess we can unshare your screen right now. So this is a newer style M83. It's got screw terminals on it. It's a 4-gang box. So basically what happens is that when you address the number 1 address, it's going to reserve the next 3 addresses. And as you can see here at the top, there are dip switch settings here. Okay, so when we add this, there can be an option. Now this is an MFX device now. The sort of separation between knowing whether or not you want to actually make your dip switch address first is sort of the method that Rick recommended. It's also the method you need to do when you are adding older units. You have to set your dip switch addressing first. That way, when you load it into the CS3 in an MFX decoded device, you would use his method where you want to keep the address that you set on the dip switches. Now, the thing is, this isn't always a restriction. Some users, they haven't even changed the default address, in which case I think all the switches are set for 0. Or you can actually set multiple devices like this for the same address. And let me go through that process as I connect this. So I'm going to connect this to my CS3 and let me show my screen up. So let's see here. Give me a second. Rick, do you have the screen where you can watch out for YouTube questions? Because once I do this, I'm going to block out that screen.
No, I do not have that information. I'm answering question and answer questions on the Zoom right now.
All right, well, hopefully. Let's see if this share is. Okay, do you see the CS3 screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So right now my power is off, my power bar is off, I've got lights. Okay, so let's see. Let me drag this over to my screen here. All right, I'm going to activate. Let's pull this down a little. You can see I don't have any devices here.
All we see is the YouTube questions.
Oh,
you're on your secondary screen.
I changed screen. Sorry. Let me do that again. Sorry, folks. Let's see if this works. All right. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
All right. So right now I've got power to my MFX device. Now, if you choose to sort of use the default dip switch addressing, or you want to have maybe like all your M83s, for instance, set for address 5, you actually want to use get a new address. And this is for MFX decoders only. Because how that works is for any device that has the same dip switch setting address, it will index that. So in other words, an indexed address is if the first one is set for address 1 and you have 2 items that are set for address 1, it's going to basically be 1.1, 1.2. And you know, if you guys have like the accurate terminology for that, it's just the concept. So let's not correct me. So we're going to actually select get a new address. And it's going to load the items. Now, the reason why this is important is because you can kind of maybe see how the turnouts now have a sort of a placeholder for the items that were added. And because it's the first M83, it's sort of giving it an index. This is the A device. It's the first M83 in my chain. And it automatically reserves the 4 outputs of that device. So if you added another M83 or an M84 and it had the same address, or basically it doesn't even have to be the same address, because you can set the dip switches so that it has a different address. It's really your choice. And hopefully that wasn't too confusing in the long run for you. But the next device, if it's an M83, will actually have a B.1, B.2, B.3, B.4. And I'm referring to this annotation here. Okay. So it'll just be a B1 here. Excuse my writing. It's hard to write with a mouse. Okay. And so on and so forth. So let's go into edit mode. Whoops. Edit article list. Now, this is kind of interesting because it automatically says that the A device, and you can see how my icon has expanded up here. So now I actually have a reference. Whoops. I actually now have a reference to the M83 rather than just the 4 independent outputs. And you can see it's labeled A. Okay, and you should be able to, if you wanted to. Sorry, my windows need to be scrolled up. You can see down here, you can actually change the name if you wish. So down here, if I wanted to change it to 1M83. And I'll just say it's my first M83, so I'll label it that. You can see the name changes, and it changes the index because this is it changed the first index here because that was the one that I was actually editing. Oops, draw. So come on, go into draw mode. You can see how it changed up here. Sorry, here's where I can actually change the name. Now that I selected the M83, this one here, I can actually change the name down here. So that's what I should have done. And I will do that now just to show you guys. Come on, select. The power of Zoom, right? All right, I'm gonna skip that. Anyways, the address is here. If you notice on the lower right of the screen, I actually have this button here. And if you click on that, it actually pulls up my sub panel. And this is your configuration. And this is one way where you can actually change your devices. So let's say I'm going to click on A2. Is this correct, Rick? Let's see. Sorry. I think this is sort of a changeover from the old software, the way it used to work, because you used to be able to assign your devices on your outputs here in this window. It used to come up blank, but I think now they've just kind of altered it so we can actually now do it this way. We can just change whatever device you want. Let's change this to a right-hand turnout. And it's pretty much cut and dry that way. Now, if you're loading a device, and this might be a little bit disjointed here, if you see this address number is red at any time, it basically means that you're using a duplicated address elsewhere. So you always want to be sure that this address number is black before you actually save it out. Otherwise, you'll just kind of have to change it. Sorry, get out there. All right, Rick, can you think of anything else I need to kind of cover here? I think that's basically it. You do have
it's so simple. It's, you know, fairly short seminar here.
So yeah, are there any questions at this point?
An M84 will be identical to the M83 as far as loading it into the central station. And without getting into the configuration of all of these, which can get very confusing, it's, you know, we can take some questions.
Yes, I do. So there are a couple of questions that we have on YouTube. When adding items, does the CS3 add them in the list in order of the addresses? Yes, it should. It will in most cases. I think we have seen some users load up independent devices, in other words, like older address settings. And what they did was they may have allowed an M83 to decide the address. And it's possible, I think what happened was the M83 overlapped addresses on articles that were already added into the system. So what happened there is I believe the articles they added were not MFX devices. So in other words, they added an old turnout signal or an old turnout decoder to like address 3, for instance. And address 1 and 2 were available. So the M83 took those addresses and it added another one at 3 and that duplicated addresses. So there's a little bit of confusion there on that. If you have articles that exist, if you're going to add an MFX device, then maybe it's a good idea to preset the address. But you can go into your articles here and check for a clear bank of 4 addresses. And that way you know what to set it for. If you're only dealing with MFX devices, then yeah, go ahead and let the CS3 decide all the addresses, because it's going to do it in its sequential order. Once it's basically in your article list as it is in the view here, so where I have 4, the CS3 will automatically assume that these 4 are taken anyways, even though it's just the single address based on what you program the M83 at.
Yeah, we had a question. What does K83 and M83 mean? It's confusing knowing which one is which. Well, basically, we don't know what the K or the M mean, besides the K83 is the older style multi-decoder, and the M83 is a new style multi-decoder. So that's basically it. They do the same thing. The M83 and M84 are configurable. You can change how the outputs react if you like. You wouldn't really want to do that too much to an M83, but in M84, it does open up a lot of possibilities, which again gets into the configuration and can get very confusing in a webinar.
I have Joe on the YouTube channel. He says, does the device remember the CS3 on the MFX? Does the device or the CS3 remember the address? I would probably say the CS3 retains the address on the MFX device, because you could probably take like an M83 decoder, a MFX decoder, and bring it to another CS3, and it's going to set its own address according to what's clear on the CS3. So that's a good question. I would say definitely the CS3 remembers it. Now there's probably some nerdy details. When you have the 2 MFX devices, or you have an MFX controller and you have an MFX device, there's what is termed sort of a handshake. In other words, the 2 devices are paired together. If you say, for instance, like a locomotive, if you delete a locomotive, an MFX locomotive from the track, or let me actually rephrase that. If you delete that locomotive from your inventory, but you pulled the locomotive off the track first, then when you delete the locomotive out of the CS3, you're only deleting half the handshake, because the decoder on the locomotive still thinks it's paired to the CS3 that you had registered it with. So in that sense, what happens is with some of these guys, when they say, I can't find my MFX locomotive because I did it before, well, that's because you may have deleted it when it was off track and that handshake is incomplete. It's always going to think it belongs to that CS3. So in the case of MFX, is when you're deleting a locomotive from the inventory, make sure it's on the track before you delete it. That way you clear that handshake out. So in the long roundabout way of answering that question, the memory still is on the CS3, but you have to be aware that that handshake may interfere with certain things. But if you're going to re-register on a separate CS3, that's okay. It doesn't retain memory inside the device itself. So hopefully you understood that.
Okay, we have a question here from Pete Bradbury that's getting a CS3 delivered tomorrow. Good job. When I connect it, will it detect all my existing turnouts and M83 and M84 boxes? And he says, I forgot to add, I'm running MS2 controllers at present. Okay, well, there was the first M83s and M84s that came out were non-MFX. They are now. So if they are the MFX version, you can just go and discover new MFX devices like I showed you to add the articles. And it should, if you have them configured correctly now, they should be configured correctly when it loads them. Basically, that's it. If they're non-MFX, M83 and M84s, then you will have to go and add them manually. So
All right.
Please, done.
No current questions.
Yeah, short one this time.
Well, we can always continue on with different topics. I have some DIN cables for my CS1, 2, and 3 collection. How can I tell what they are for? That is a good question. Let's see. Yeah, some of it's, unfortunately, some of it's trial and error unless you label it. You do have, so some of the collections off the top of my head, you have a cable that is to extend a mobile station connection to a control cable. You have, I think there are a couple of extension cables, but on the back of them, they're pretty much unique. You have a 9-pin cable, you have a 7-pin with a like a horizontal plug, a plastic insert. You have a 6-pin that's got a vertical insert on it. And they all have specific uses. I can't really answer that.
The catalog.
I have them labeled. Yeah.
The catalog will tell you what pins each cable has, and if that's the cable you have, then it gives you a description of what it's used for also.
Okay. So do you want to begin maybe covering some of the stuff on track planning?
I'd rather keep that for a whole different topic because people may be waiting for that in a webinar and not ready for it now.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go back. Alan, actually, hold on. We're going to go to Alan Fisher's question. He says he has discussed CS3's changing the loco addresses, which cannot be changed with dip switches. Just as
okay. Okay, that's a loaded question right there.
Well, yeah. So one of the first things to consider too is you have to know whether or not there is a distinction between an FX decoder, which a lot of them do not have dip switches, and then there's an MFX decoder, which is, I think, the harder one to answer because I don't think I've ever physically tried to change an MFX address. And excuse me, Rick, I'm just going to kind of go through this really quick. So there are two methods when you have an FX decoder and you need to change the addresses. Those can be done through your configuration settings on your CS3. You have to have that loaded onto a programming track. So on the back of your CS3, there's a main layout output, and then there's a programming track output. FX decoders without dip switches or programmable decoders have to be programmed on the programming track. The opposite is true for MFX style decoders. When you're going to change CV values, addresses, and the like on an MFX decoder, don't put it on a programming track. And the reason is because when you have something applied to a programming track, there is basically a device bit in the encoding that signifies that you're actually trying to reprogram a decoder. And this is not, and it also runs it, by the way, it runs at a different operating voltage. So MFX is designed to be programmed on the main line. It does not have to be put on a programming track.
Okay, so, and to expand on that, I didn't catch Alan's question, but if you have an MFX locomotive and you want to change the address, and honestly, the only reason you would change the address is if you're going to be running it on a 6021 layout. And all you need to, what you're changing is the default address. You're not changing the MFX address because MFX is unique for each decoder in the locomotive. But to change the default address on an MFX locomotive, a lot of people, let me share my screen here. Okay, a lot of people will mistakenly go into edit mode, edit locomotives, and this is the setup screen I'm sorry, the info screen for the locomotive. It has the wrong icon, but I'm not worried about that. And it says it's address 7. Now that address that it gives it is just an index. It's not really an address. That's the first address that was available that it found. And that way, when you're back in your inventory screen, it can sort by address. MFX doesn't really have an address. I mean, it does, but that's so it can sort. This isn't the address of the locomotive. 7 is not the address of this locomotive because it's MFX. What I need to do is I need to get into the configuration screen and read all the CVs. And once it's done reading the CVs, we can actually see what the default address is. A lot of times, if it comes from the factory, the manual will tell you the default address. And again, that's just to run it on an old 6021 or even a DCC powered layout. That would be the default address. So I have to wait a second here for this to finish reading. It doesn't let you get into these things before it's finished, so. Okay, so the default address is going to be under formats, and you'll see right here in the center it says MM2 address 53. That's the default address. And you'll note that it said 7 on the other page. So to change the default address, I would change this number to whatever I want, and then click OK, and it would change it. It would be address whatever I gave it. So that's the default address that you would want to change.
All right. Is that okay? Did you complete your answer?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm only half listening. Is it possible to extend an S88 link cable to the CS3? Yes. You actually do. There are a couple of options regarding that. One way is you can connect an S88 link to a terminal box. I believe the number is 60125 or 145.
45, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the new number is 145. The other way is, this is sort of my preferred way, and you kind of have to do that if you have boosters or a large layout. The S88 link takes up the same cable plug as the booster, I believe. The other way around it is to just use the S88 link cable, and you actually add other S88s using Ethernet cables or RJ45 type cables to whatever length you want. This is typical the way I run the layouts. I don't centralize my S88s all in one group. I actually spread them around to wherever they're needed. Also, I recommend not filling up all 16 slots in one area, because if you have a lot of development on a complex layout, you never know when you're going to need an extra input, and having that extra slot will actually help in the long run. Pete has another diesel question. If 2 diesel logs given to me when using MS2, it reports there as having MM protocol. Will the CS3 detect them and return the correct IDs? Pete, it really depends on what decoder is in it, because MFX is essentially a shell that fits over the Marklin Motorola protocol, which is what the MM stands for. So you may have to add those into your CS3 manually using either the database if you have the box number, or if they're like have been digitized, or maybe the address has been changed, you're going to have to add the address in manually, because there's no way for me to know whether or not those diesels are just strictly an MM or an FX decoder over an MFX. Only the MFX decoders will automatically load into your CS3.
Yes. So it sounds like they're going to be FX decoders in those, where you would have to load them as an item number, and then all the functions would come up and the correct icon, or at least one that's close. You can always change the icons. So. Pete also says, I've also ordered a couple of S88s. Do they interconnect with Ethernet cables? Yes, S88s interconnect with each other through Ethernet cables, and they will plug into a L88 or directly into the bus of the in the bottom of the CS3 Plus.
Okay. Yeah, you want to answer his question?
Yeah, when you say the address is that the unique ID number of the LOC? Yes, FX decoders can be set to 255 addresses, I believe. And that's what the LOC responds to is a unique address. And that's how you're able to have more than one locomotive on your track at the same time. They're all a unique address. MFX is its own unique address that gets assigned when it registers. FX are from 1 to 255, and you need to have that specific address loaded into the central station for that locomotive to operate. So.
All right. Sean asks, my locomotives will sometimes start up randomly. I have to hit the emergency stop, then select them, then hit go, and the local restop or the local stop. Okay, so that's kind of been asked before. It's kind of a lurch response of the locomotive, and here's my take on it. When you're operating your layout, let's say, and you have your trains running at a set speed, and then you're done with your operating session, you shut down your machine and you reboot it, right? And it starts up again. One of the things that kind of happens is that when you're rebooting a machine, your CS3, for instance, it initializes sort of around the layout. In other words, it's looking for maybe locomotives, and it's sort of seeing what's available, whether it's searching for new MFX devices or it's looking for locomotives that are on the layout. The thing is, your speed setting when you're last operated is retained in the decoder. And the thing is, when you start up a system, sometimes the locomotive retains at what speed it was running at, and it lurches. And that's because the CS3, and you can kind of think of it, it hasn't made the full circuit to go around to the layout and say, oh, this is set for 0 or whatever, because you didn't set it for 0 when you shut down your system. So the thing is, it takes time for the CS3 or any controller to get to like one decoder and say, oh, no, your speed should be 0 or stopped. So there's always that little bit of a memory feedback that's going in, because a decoder, especially locomotive, may have remembered its last operating speed before you shut it down. And that's my best take on it. I don't know if that's, absolute, but it has happened on many layouts.
Yeah, and I wonder if it has a Marklin decoder in it. That I've seen other brands do that.
Okay, so
somebody that raised their hand here, Korash.
Yeah, Korash, I'm looking at his question now. If an FX loco has address 53 and an MFX loco has a default address 53, will the MFX change to the next available index and discard in a way of its default address? So to answer that one, if the MFX locomotive is sort of already in the system as 53, and you're adding the FX locomotive afterwards, you will have a conflict. I would say an MFX locomotive is not going to re-index itself once it's into the system.
No.
So what you would probably have to do, if that were the case, is you would probably maybe just have to delete the MFX loco from the CS3 and let it re-register. Again, when you delete an MFX locomotive, make sure it's on the track. And that way it resolves that handshake. Then you can actually acquire it. And the MFX at that point will create an index saying that there's another address 53 on that device, and give it like a 53.1, whatever the address is. Now, the thing is, what I'm telling you, an index address is 53.1 is not actually what it's going to read. It may actually give you some totally random number that you can't make math out of. But the thing is, it does index that locomotive.
I'm wondering if it'll still run, the MFX will still run on 53 because the central station is throwing out a default code that it would respond to like on a 6021 layout. So that's a very good question. That's something I'm gonna test.
I believe they will both operate at 50.
Yeah, I think they will also. So.
Yeah. So yeah, the default addresses on MFX locomotives are really a good reference if you're taking your locomotive to a user who doesn't have an MFX style controller. And that's probably the best thing, you just let it sit. There's no reason. I tend not to want to change the default address on MFX locomotives. Not that I know how to.
Sean's getting into deep questions.
Sean, you're diving deep. Yes.
Yeah.
Those are topics we hope to cover in 3 months.
Yeah.
Basically, his questions is, how do I make sure that a contact circuit track will only work for a specific event and not universally? You can only assign one contact or circuit track for an event. Well, yeah. The way events kind of work is you can assign the trigger, which is what I think you're referring to, or you can assign a circuit track to be sort of an advanced option within the script, but that does not actually control it. So
Yeah.
let us cover that in a few months.
That is pretty deep. There's ways around it that I can figure out in my head a quarter of the way.
Hey Rick, did you cover did you want to maybe cover an M84 a little bit? Because I did have an interesting question from a user. Basically, Rick wrote an article a few months ago where you can actually control track blocks using an M84 with, let's say, a Mobile Station 2 or a non-CS controller. And I recently answered a question from a user, and he was having trouble with this setup because he actually had a CS3, but he was using his M84 to control stop blocks rather than going through the event script on a CS3. So I was just thinking.
So he was doing it manually?
He was connecting it the way you wrote your article on a CS3. Does that make sense?
No. I probably have to go back and read my article. Well, like we said, the M83 and M84 are configurable. Now, they're, in a way, they're basically both the same unit, except an M83 is designed for turnouts. Now, you can configure it like an M84 to turn something on and off. The thing is, if you use an M83 to turn something on and off, say like a light, for example, then it's going to use track power to power that light. An M84 does not use track power to power the lights. An M84, the power that you put into it, it opens and closes relays inside it, and that's the power that comes out. So you're not robbing track power when you use an M84. That's why an M84 is best for accessories and lighting and stuff like that. Now you can also use it to, so to say, disconnect track power. But again, you're putting in the input, the center post, whatever lead you put in there gets channeled out to the left or the right or both, depending on how you configure it. So it's a little bit hard to explain without a diagram. I don't have an M84 set up on my layout or even out of the box right now. Now, what you can do to use an M84 on your layout that you control with a mobile station is it needs to be configured however you want in the first place on a central station. And then it will do what it's programmed to do once it's plugged into your mobile station layout. So if I wanted to control, this gets really deep. I configured an M84 to have random lighting on and off, blinking. The thing blinks, and I literally hooked up 30 LEDs to an HO Christmas tree, and the lights blink randomly.
Nerd.
It's very annoying to hook up all the wires, but it's an extreme example. And in the future, maybe in the next webinar, I'll drag it out and set it up and be able to show exactly how what I did. So I can take that M84 and that Christmas tree and I can put it on a layout that's being controlled by a mobile station, and it will still do the same thing. It will do what it's programmed to do and blink the lights randomly. So you can't configure it on a mobile station, but you can operate it on a mobile station. That answers the question. And I know that's kind of confusing, but
yeah,
the whole topic is a little confusing as Curtis is getting into now.
So what I'm showing on my screen basically is I went into the edit mode of the multi-decoder A that I had loaded earlier. And to access the configuration information, it does have to be connected to the layout. So I can't really show you, let's say, an M84, but you can kind of see there's all kinds of options here that I don't really want to get too far in depth with. It's kind of covered in the manual.
Yeah.
Also, there was an article that we wrote covering the M83 in depth. If you need reference for that, send us an email. We'll let you know which article that is. Covered it as best as I could at the time. But yeah, there's a lot of advanced features in here for you.
It's that mode preset default is where you go to change the mode down at the bottom.
Okay, so let me see if I can scroll this up. No, it doesn't really go.
Click on it.
So you do have options here. So you can actually set an M83 for these different types of settings, which is very interesting because you can see where it says lighting 8 addresses. So
Yeah.
it kind of acts like an M84, I would think.
Yes, they're both configurable the same, except the M84 does not draw track power to these accessories. An M83 will take track power from these accessories. So if you're trying to light a building, use an M84 because you're not stealing your own track power.
Okay, so let me see if I can do a quick explanation that makes sense, and we can answer a couple more questions that have been stockpiling here. So if this was an M83, you have your 4 outputs here, and these send out a momentary pulse of power to switch your turnouts, and that power gets drawn from your input power or your track power buffers.
That's the default mode.
That's the default mode. The difference between this and a K83 or an M83, sorry, is that these.
It is an M83.
I'm an M84. Sorry, I could also hold it upright, right? An M84 does not have any kind of direct connection to your track outputs. Internally, all this does is it's just going to switch the relays on these. How these and an M83 works is whatever power you supply into, let's say, the center plug, it's just like a switched wire. It's going to output to the left or the green or the red side. So you can actually wire, lighting to this because you would supply a different power bus or different power supply to these outputs. They're not tied in to track power at all.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the questions, Howdy Doody asks, where can I buy a polo shirt like ours? You know, I don't know if they're on the Marklin site, or they wouldn't be. I don't know if they're available through us. They actually have hoodies, which are really cool.
Yeah, they're on the Marklin site under, I forget what, but there's a place where you can buy, coffee cups, Christmas ornaments, shirts, apparel. It's on the Marklin. I know it's on the German site, marklin.de. You can just order from there, or just get the item number and your dealer can order them. And when they come in, your dealer will tell you, just like a locomotive or track order.
All right, Karach, how does the programming track and layout track show up on the CS3? Okay, so that's an interesting question. The track itself does not actually show up in the CS3, nor is it important. What happens is on the back of your CS3, there are two different outputs here. This is your power plug. This is the plug to the main line. And this is actually the plug insert for a programming track. So the programming track is actually a separate piece of track that you would wire track feeds to. And as I showed in that configuration window that I shared a while ago, anything that you change in there is going to get programmed out through this port and not this port. Okay. I can answer Mark's question. I have a contact track that is always activated when I turn on my CS3 Plus. No other contact track or read switch on my layout does that. What is the possible issue on that one contact?
Is it a circuit track? Is it well, you say contact, so you've insulated one rail?
Yeah, either way, it's shorting to the power. In other words, it's not
what can happen that I've noticed is, for one possibility, is the rails, when you snap them together, those two rails are butting up together and making contact. You might need to just push one rail back, take a razor blade or something, and just to move one rail back from the other. I've seen that happen on my layout. If it is a contact track, you may not have your insulators in correctly underneath, insulating that rail. When we first started doing that, I don't know if you remember, Curtis, we would look at the rail like this, put the insulator on the rail and put it down, but when you put it down, it's like turned around, it's upside down, and we actually put it on the wrong side. So you need to make sure you have it on the correct contacts in the rail, or in the C-track. Can't think of much else that would make it do it. Somehow, like Curtis said, it is grounding to your rail, your home.
Yeah, somewhere along the line, it's making contact to the rail it's supposed to insulate from. So, all right.
All right. No questions. All right.
You guys are
be so short.
You guys are getting smarter.
So.
All right. One person did ask a while ago, sort of a rehash on loading locomotives. Do you want to go over that one again quickly?
Loading
non-MFX decoder locomotives.
I can do that. I don't have a non-MFX locomotive, but I can go through the process.
Okay.
Let's answer Pete real quick here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't read the question yet.
Oh.
Comparing my UK MS2 layout. Your lights are flickering. I don't understand which lights are flickering. Is it your track? I'm sorry, your headlights in your locomotives? Is it the lights in your buildings? Usually flickering lights are basically the digital code going down, building lights. If you're taking track power, then yes, your lights are probably going to flicker because the digital code causes interference in an incandescent bulb and an LED, and they will flicker. So that would be the short answer.
Building lights.
Yeah.
Yes, the building lights, if they're connected to track power, always sort of can be subject to the digital flicker.
Basically, the digital code is an interference in the current, and it makes the lights flicker.
Yeah, Howdy Doody responds for his turnouts, he had to add a rectifier and a capacitor to stop the flicker. You don't always have to use a rectifier. Rectifiers are great because they convert basically an AC signal to a DC signal. Capacitor is an option. You can actually use a resistor and a capacitor combination in a specific wiring to solve that. But that's getting technical. If you want to address that later, send us an email.
Okay, to load an FX locomotive, is that what the question was?
Any non-MFX locomotive, I think.
Non-MFX locomotive. Share my screen here. Into the CS3. Okay. Do you think future Marklin engines will have energy capacitors? Yeah, some of them do now. You can buy one for a new, I have some, but they're put away. You can buy them if you're retrofitting a locomotive, and it will plug into the 21-pin mounting board of the for the decoder, which is really convenient. You don't have to wire it in. You just plug it into the mounting board. It comes with a little plug like the speakers do for a sound decoder. So I have yet to actually do that, but they're pretty handy. Of course, I should probably look up the number for that so that I'll look that up, or email us and I'll give you the number. Okay, to load a non-MFX locomotive, there's two ways you can do it. You can go to the plus here, and it will take you to the configuration screen. Don't mind this icon. As trying to be funny, I changed my default icon because I got tired of the question marks, and I have not put it back yet. And one of these days, I will put it back. So we covered this in the first webinar, and there was one aspect that I did forget, which I will try not to forget this time. So what you want to do is you want to select your decoder type up in the top left-hand side. You're gonna, for a Marklin FX, you're gonna select MM, Marklin Motorola. Okay. At that point, the model database, the next box to the right, will come up. And this, if it came as an FX locomotive, you can just search by number. You can search by any item number. But if you have the particular item number, this will actually load all the functions, because the database will have all the functions in it once you select it. So if I selected one of these like this, comes up with the icon, and the upper left-hand corner, it only comes up with the a light. That's all this locomotive had, was a light. The name is correct. Locomotive symbol is incorrect. For some reason, it defaulted to a diesel locomotive. The address from the factory comes up. So that's an easy way to load an FX locomotive if it came as an FX locomotive. If it did not, say you retrofitted it with a 60906 decoder, once again, or the same thing for a for a 60901 series decoder. You go to MM. The model database is not accessible under DCC mode because they're not DCC locomotives. So you have to switch to MM to get the model database. Next, what you would do is you would set the address to whatever you want, whatever the locomotive is set for. And this is where the part I forgot, which I will get to in a moment. Next, we can go down to the name and we can change the name to whatever we want. It's going to say Marklin, Motorola, Loc, and 23 because 23 is the address I gave it. It's a Marklin, Motorola protocol, so that's why the MM is up there. That will give you the name. You can name it whatever you want. The symbol, this symbol is mostly for if you run it on a mobile station. It gives you a default icon. So you can select what you want for this and the speedometer reading. Okay, now if you don't know the address, this is where it gets kind of fun. If you don't know the address, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to load a locomotive and save it. Okay, so I have my default locomotive and it's saved in my inventory. Now, I don't know the address, so I'm gonna go in and edit locomotives and I will select that locomotive. It gave a default address because 23 was something it came up with. Now you'll see at the top, next to the address on the left, it says read. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to have your locomotive loaded on your programming track. And it's gonna look for addresses. It's gonna sample every address and it's gonna look for a power draw. So if I click that, it's looking for a power draw now on my CS3 on the programming track. Unfortunately, I don't have a locomotive on there, nor do I have a programming track plugged in. So the reading was not successful. Many times it will be not successful just because one reason or another, we can't answer that. I've noticed that if it has LED lights, I don't think it's enough of a power draw for the central station to detect it. So at that point, you're gonna have to refer to the manual or other documentation if it's been changed. Usually it's the manual address or the address in the manual. So that's basically it. Once it finds that address where it sees the power draw, it will change the address here automatically. And it will be whatever it found. And then you just click OK and it should work. So that's how to load a manual FX decoder or dip switch decoder. And if you don't know the address, it can help you find it. What is the significance of the CE number in green text on the, oh.
I just sent a text. It's basically,
yeah.
Those letters are just basically manufacturing city or where it was put together. Is that correct?
I think it just means it's European.
Well, yeah, but I think there's an HM prefix too.
Okay.
Our locomotive address is different from switching addresses on your layout. M83, M84 signed address. Yes and no. They're never going to conflict. So you can use the same address on an M83, M84 as you would a locomotive because it's a different device. So it has a different sort of index or prefix. So yeah, you can duplicate addresses between those two different things. They're never going to conflict. S88s do not have assigned addresses. They are basically based on a module bus architecture. It's a CAN bus is what it's called. It looks for which wire it's connected to if you use a Link 88 or a bus or the underside of your CS3, and then it counts the modules, how many S88s are connected, and then from then it actually looks up which input is activated. But as far as M83s, M84s, and the Locos, yeah, it just uses a different coding index to recognize that one's an M83 or an article, and the other one is to recognize it as a locomotive. So those address things will never conflict. Robert wrote a comment. I believe Tom Catherall had an article as to exact which digits indicated on what these stickers. It's an old digital newsletter. Yeah, I don't have that reference.
That's a serial. Basically, it's a serial number for your locomotives. I log my serial numbers. There's also a letter before the serial number, which gives you an indication of what years it was made, year or years. I always thought I should put that in an article, but it'd be such a short article. I never bothered. The information is out there, basically.
You should. It's a separate article. Why not?
Yeah, it'd be like a quarter of a page.
But, you know, but he says you can't do 2 articles in a newsletter.
That's twice the work.
Well, they appreciate that. They don't pay us anymore. All right. What else can we talk about, folks? Oh, 3-way turnouts.
Yes, yeah, we had a question. I had a question yesterday about how to put the lantern kits in the 3-way turnouts, because the little LED circuit board, the holder for the LED circuit board is not used. So it does not, and there's no screw holes to screw in the bottom of the 3-way turnout. And I didn't have a 3-way turnout to check. And luckily Curtis does, and he can show you.
Okay, so here is the turnout lanterns right there. There's one here. There's one there. And how it works is you just don't use the mounting frame that they give you with the turnout boards. So your light diffusers there's a distinct hole for the light diffusers, which is the hole that goes up through the top. And the lanterns actually get fit right into these slots here. They clip into place. Now, the gentleman who talked about flickering lights, yeah, these should never flicker, because there's actually, believe it or not, there's actually 2 lights on each of these boards that covers the polarity on the the old AC signals. So these things should never flicker.
Yeah.
There you go. There's that question. Let's see.
Load an old K83 into the CS3.
Yes, I could do that. Actually, that's a good topic. Let me go share my screen here. Okay. All right. When you want to add an older K83 to a CS3, and we'll just leave the new one up here, you click on the add button, and you can see it has M83.2, which was added in the article list. And well, it's funny that it listed it as an M83.2.
No, go back.
But
you're in edit articles. You want to add, go back.
No, I clicked on the add button here. So yes, you follow what I did there. So you can click add there, or you can click on this, and this is going to add a new article. So that should apply the same way, right?
You get a selection if you do it the other way.
Yeah. Okay, so we can do it both ways. So let me just kind of go back. Let me backtrack and do it the recommended way here. Let's delete this device. Come on, go away. Sorry, I got a window blocking my buttons. And let's go here. So you want to add an article.
Add an article. That's the way I like doing it.
Okay.
Now you pick a device.
Let's say it's a turnout. Same thing.
It's M83.
Yeah.
You're adding a turnout to the M83. He wants to know how to add an old K83.
Yeah, I know. No, this is a default label. So that's all it did. It just added a default label. So yeah, disregard that. So I can call it anything I want. So just the lack of typing here. Now, there is a configuration here that we need to locate. You guys are using older devices that we've forgotten. That's a good question here. Old multi-decoder. Let's see. What happened to the configuration on that, buddy?
You have to go back and add article, miscellaneous article.
Yeah, okay, let's try that. That's a good thing you asked that, because now we're proving, yeah, maybe these guys don't know everything.
Not there. Edit.
Yeah, I gotcha. Add article, right?
Yes. Yes. Miscellaneous devices.
Let's try that one.
And then it gives you the same thing.
Let's see.
Yeah. When was the last time you added a
Where was the configuration? It should have been under this menu here, but it doesn't actually have it.
No, those are default CVs.
Yeah, that's not going to help us. So just so you are aware of why we're a little stumped on this, is what there was a recent software update probably not too long ago, which, you know, in our terms is long enough not to have ever touched it.
It's not a solenoid accessory, is it?
No, it should be a configurable.
It has been so long since I've done that.
Well, you got us on a good one here. Actually, let's actually save this. It's like maybe one of those weird two-step approaches. No, all it's doing is just giving us a straight setup.
I remember I found it once and promptly forgot it.
Good job. That is the prize question. That is the prize question right there, folks.
Stump the nerds.
Stump the nerds. Yeah. Used to be an option where you would actually have to select what kind of device it is. It's obviously not going to be here. I don't have anything to load up from. Let's see if we can load a profile though. 6441 481. That's for a non-MFX decoder. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a prize. Who asked that question there?
I think that it doesn't load as a K84. I think you just load the turnouts with that address, and you have to manually configure and know that you need those 4 addresses after that first one. So you have to set the dip switches accordingly in your central station to a old multi-decoder, and then you're going to give the turnouts an icon anyway, but it's not really going to know that it's an old K83. It's going to just send out the code as that address.
Yeah, so we had a response from one of our users. He set up K83 with 4 separate solenoid items with the 4 sequential addresses. So yeah, I guess maybe the CS3 software is now treating it as independent addresses. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
So that applies to Gary. Can you hook up a group of lights to a distribution strip, then to an M84? How many lights can one M84 output handle? So again, the M84 is an independent circuit on the output. So whatever power supply you add to that terminal is like a direct, it's just like a switch on a wire. So whatever limitations you have on your power supply into that output will just be looped back out to your lights. You know, and you know, all that kind of electrical stuff, current, resistance is all going to apply. I can't do the math for you because I don't really know what lights you're going to use anyways. The gray M83 and M84 that are not black, how do those differ? They're probably not MFX.
Yeah, I don't remember if there was a gray version that was MFX or not. If I don't believe they actually say MFX on the box, but they do on the outer box if you still have it. If not, the item number is on the back of the K83 or 84. So you can check that and then check the Marklin website to see if it was MFX or not, basically. We don't retain the specific features of each item number in the Marklin catalog.
Yeah, only the black boxes. I think when they did the black box M83, M84s is when they transitioned over to MFX. I did get caught up in that transition, having an older device and just waiting for it to load, and it never did. Luckily, I'm a patient man.
Still beating that horse, are you?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for it to load.
So Gary Walden had a question. If we want to, maybe you want to give him a voice and let him talk. If you're ready to talk, Gary, you got your hand up.
Yeah, sure.
Gary's in he's in Hawaii.
Is his mic working?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Oh, did you not initialize him?
You're the host.
Oh. I'm not seeing his name up. Let me see. I don't see anybody raising a hand. Hang on, maybe I'm just looking in the wrong window.
And the participants.
Gotcha. Gary. All right, Gary, your microphone, you just unmute your mic and you should be able to say something.
If you want. Or anybody else raise their hand and we can
anybody else has
answer questions.
How about that? Is that any better?
Hey, Gary.
Right. Go ahead.
Okay. Found it. Hey, I sent you an email. Did you answer that question? I got sort of in the middle here about the loading of a brand new CS3. And I'm doing it.
Go ahead.
Doing it individually, or should I put it on my layout right away?
Are you talking about as a slave device?
No, brand new, out of the box, CS3. Should I load it using a USB, or should I just hook it up to my layout and let it load automatically?
Are you talking transferring data from a CS2?
Yeah, transferring data from a CS2.
We don't know the answer. That's why we're laughing.
Oh, okay.
All right, so here's our take on it. Unless something happened in the latest update where they allowed for trackboard plans, the transfer of data from a CS2 to a CS3 is a jumbled mess. So it's not
the track plan.
Yeah, the track plan is the worst. The rest of it should load okay. You know, this is only sort of important for guys who have a lot of like non-MFX locomotives. They don't want to load these things up manually. Your layout is going to be a mess, I think. So you're going to save more time. It's more optimal to start from scratch than it is to try to retrieve and fix the jumble that you're going to get. And
for your track plan.
Yeah, we tried it and it was just too much. It would have been too much work, Gary. I think the procedures you really want to do right now is I would actually absolutely make sure your software is up to date first. And then I would connect it to the layout and let everything load that's MFX. And then from there, load up your non-MFX items. And, you know, unfortunately, yeah, I can't make a recommendation for the track plan. That being said, you're always welcome to try it, because what you want to do, and this is for everybody out there, you should learn to save your working layouts that you know are working, because that's going to be, you may be surprised, especially with MFX confusion, the restore points are going to be your friends. You always want to have an incremental backup, knowing what to do. And if you guys don't know how to do that, I can always do a simple demonstration for you. All right. And if you're interested in that, Gary.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, definitely you would, I would load it, you know, go ahead. You know what? Go ahead and load everything from a USB stick and take a look at it. Because the thing is, if it really doesn't work for you, there's no harm in starting over. Because
Then go back and just set it back. You put it back to tracking to what is it, manufacturer?
No. You load the profile start config, and that's the profile.
Yeah, let me go through the backup and restore stuff, because that's going to benefit a lot of you people who have CS3s. Or actually, if you read the last newsletter article, we were talking about slaving a CS3 to a CS3 Plus, because we have a lot of users who had the CS3 first, and they did all their layout development. And when they slave and master a CS3 Plus to that, all that data disappears because it's living on the slave. And the way a slave works is it reads all the information off the master device. And if you're adding the master, it's got no information. So if that's all your questions, Gary, I'm going to put you back on mute, and then I'll go through the demonstration of loading up, loading and
Okay, I'll
restoring.
get back to you. I got another one, but let's do that one first.
All right. Well, I can probably do it on screen. So let me show my screen again. All right, share. All right. So here's what we have a layout, basically, or the stuff we've just been doing on the CS3 for today. When you guys are ready to save your layout, you click on your system button. And the first screen you usually should see, this is going to be one of them. It'll look like that. And this is the screen you're looking for. And what you're going to do is you want to just click on where it says data, save. And you generally, everything here, you see how it's written on the left here, it says CS3. And I'll show that here, right here, it says CS3. This is where you're going to save to. And it's always going to be saved generally in a backup folder. Okay. Your default name, you want to change. Don't just save it under these backups, because it's never going to give you an indication of what layout you're using if you have different layouts, or what date you saved it as. And you can see under my example, I have a number of files. Here I've got, you know, they're all dated by month for me. Some are by dates. I have different running operations. So here's one that runs 5 trains, because I may want to put on a really long train, which cancels out one of my yards. And then I can run 6 trains, all automated. So change these names, create an increment, save. So the thing is, for you, Gary, you can load up everything and you can sort of retrieve stuff. Now, to retrieve information, let's get out of this one, because this is the save mode. And I'm not going to replace it. So let me cancel that out. What you want to do is you're going to restore. And it's going to ask you, do you want to replace everything that's in the operating memory? That's what we just did today, is an operating memory with what I'm restoring from. I'm going to click yes, and I have the same files. So all I need to do here is I'm going to click one name, and I'm going to restore. And your system is going to reboot. And just give it a few moments while it reloads. Ask something in German, and there's my layout. So I've reloaded the layout. In your case, Gary, because you're starting out, what I would recommend is, let's go back to restore point here. And this is the other way your screen will look. You can either click on this button where it says system, or you can click on the CS3. Should take you to the same window. All right.
Okay.
And restore. Let's go through this again. Because I have a number of files here, let's go down to the one file that you have. Now, this is the file you're going to look for to go to your factory settings. Start config zip.
Ah, okay.
Okay. For instance, for the purposes of what I'm doing, you know, where we write articles, actually what I did was I emptied out that start configure and I created an empty config window. That's this one here, where I've deleted everything. And this to me is a complete blank slate. So let me click that and I'll show you what it looks like. And I could always cancel this out so I don't have to deal with the language thing again. That's a different setting. And there it is. I have nothing in this system.
Okay.
So yes, so load everything up on your USB stick. Try it out. If it doesn't work, go back to you know, the default or the start config window.
Okay. But you don't need to put a chip in or a USB chip?
You
Or-
can. And I'm looking for, if you give me a second, I'm going to look for USB stick so I can plug it in.
But I have a CS2 and I keep a backup chip on it. I've never had to use it.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
So, right. So what you want to do there is you can do this. Let me just, because we already went through this procedure, I can show it again here. So let's go restore. Now, what's going to happen here is you're actually going to see another entry right here. It's going to say USB.
Okay.
Okay. You have to be sure you select that because this USB will also have a backup folder on it, which is where it should all live. Yours might actually say USB, and there may be another window here that says CS2, and you can click on that. As long as you can locate a file on this column here, this side,
Okay.
right? And that should load it up for you.
Okay.
All right.
All those folders that you have under file name,
Mhm.
you have to load each one individually?
All these folders, no, you just,
Yeah.
because each of these is sort of a different configuration of my layout.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And these first four that you see at the top, these are just sort of developmental stages that I had. Okay. And you can see, let's see, my oldest one here looks like it's, well, this one was on the month of December. This one was on the 21st of December. This one was on the 17th of this year. And then my last one was in February. And then after this, it's basically all these files underneath it that you see are just sort of the different operating styles that I can run on the layout. So you can see the fourth entry here, I can run 7 trains on the layout automatically. These are just different files that you do, because if you have like a layout that is sort of diverse and you want to run things differently, rather than making exceptions in your programming, I create just a separate file, and whatever I feel that I want to run, I'll load that file up instead. Because it's, as you've seen, I've already restored 2 different systems, and it's really quick. All I got to do is select it, click OK. The system does a reboot, and you know, I'm operating my trains differently. For me, I'm a big proponent of trying to avoid boredom. So, you know, I may run it's the same layout. It just runs and has a different setup in the window. And you can see over here, I think I did something goofy where I was going to wire up some lights underneath the lights, so I knew which lines were occupied with staging lights. And that's, if you can't see what I'm pointing at, I'm actually pointing at.
Okay, but all this is stored in the CS3, right?
Yeah, you have internal memory and you have a USB stick. I choose to use internal memory because I hate hunting around for a USB stick.
When you're transferring data from one central station to another, you have to use the USB stick.
Yeah, when you want to transfer, yeah. It doesn't apply necessarily for a slave unit. Well, yeah, it actually does apply for a slave unit. I wrote that in the article. The funny thing is, if you have a slave device and everything's living on your slave unit, you cannot transfer the data from the slave to the master.
All right.
You have to separate the devices, load your memory onto a USB stick, and transfer it once you've connected the two devices.
If you use the CS2 as a slave unit, will it forget everything that was on the CS2 at the time before you used it as a slave?
All right. Yeah. So that's a good question. The slave itself, once you go into slave mode, it basically overrides its memory and just takes the memory off the CS3. It doesn't touch the memory that's built into the system. So when you disconnect the master slave cable, then it's going to revert to its own self-contained master and read its own memory. So the memory will still always, it should always be in memory banks. Okay. You know, you're kind of alluding to, it's never a bad idea to back up on a USB stick if you want. You know,
or the internal memory at that point.
Yeah. You know, you can do both. You know, it's like wearing pants and suspenders. I mean, belt and suspenders. It's really up to you.
But the CS2, does it have a backup memory?
Yeah, it is as a way to save. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, that's what we're here for, to tell you things.
Okay.
Let's go to, if you want to let Sean Finelli talk.
Go ahead. I'm done.
All right. Thanks. Let me
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Let me get out of this window because I'm a little confused when it comes to sharing. Where is the participants window? All right. So let me mute you out. All right, Sean, go ahead and unmute yourself.
If you want to talk.
I didn't understand initially why you would have saved 5, 6, 7, but your last series of explanation was that you really are bringing in only your really roots, I guess, or operating system. So it just automatically brings in a different layout. Is that what I understand?
A different
Nothing else changed, just a different layout configuration.
Oh, yeah. Because so that notation on that. So let me kind of show that again here.
So if you could show perhaps what you see when you have 7 and what you would see when you bring up a configuration of 5.
All right, yeah. So let me clarify what's going on there. I don't know which screen is going to be the best to clarify that information, but let me just point out what you're referring to. So what Sean is asking is, what's the difference between my listing of 5 long, 6 train, 6 train, 7 train? The way my layout works, Sean, is that to put it mildly, the most amount of trains I can run on this layout is going to be 7 trains automatically. If I want to, let's say, eliminate one of these stops, then the most I can run is 6 trains. And all that number signifies is what's my, it just reminds me of what my limitation on the layout of that running operation is. So for instance, let me see if I can go to a portion of my layout here. So loop exchange. Okay. All right. So one limitation I have, Sean, is this section of track here. And let me pull up the operating menu so I can show you what I'm pointing at here. One limitation I have is this section of track here. This is sort of a short changing yard. In other words, if I have a train on this line waiting, I can make the train that enters this line release this one. So I always have a back and forth of the trains going, okay? If, for instance, I want to put on a longer train, this siding section is really too short for, like, say, 5 passenger cars. So I have to eliminate this section. In other words, I have to have a different coding scheme, event scheme to do that, because I don't want a train stopped on here. It's just going to have its caboose sitting on this turnout, right? So when I eliminate that, the coding I did is a separate file. In other words, I can only run 5 trains, not 6 trains. That's what those numbers is. Does that make sense?
But why wouldn't it just be a different event?
Okay, so the reason why I don't do that is, and this is something I learned with the CS2, when I make exceptions to the way the layout runs, right? Sometimes what may seem simple affects different events, because all these events sometimes sort of have an effect on the one behind it or the one in front of it. Okay, so the thing is to program and encode all these exceptions can actually cascade into a failure where there's no way to fix it. There's no way for you to like sort out, you know, one event might affect 4 others, and then you have to go through each of those 4 to clear things out.
So,
In
so
my
that might-
instance,
I'm sorry.
no,
Sorry.
so in my instance, it's actually better to sort of have a different file that has simple coding rather than creating exceptional coding. Okay, so that's why I have different files. It's easier to load that up than to try to make exceptions to the rule, because part of my operating is I like to vary my layout works where I don't really have to worry about how long a train is in most instances. In this case, with this yard, I do have to worry about how long a train is.
So does that answer my question before when I was talking about a contact track and trying to not make it universal? Could I have the contact track do something in one configuration and then, just as you do, save it in another configuration to do something else?
Okay, yeah, so if I understand your question correctly, what I've done or how I do this is, you know, rather than having to re-encode, you know, in other words, reprogram the entire layout, what I'll do is I'll save the layout under a different name, the proper adjustments to one section. Okay, so in your question, I believe if it's correct, if we looked at all the coding for this panel, sorry, go away. If we look at all the coding that I've done for this section of the layout, for instance, it's universal. It's the standard. It's in every file that I have. The only thing that has an exception is I have one layout that controls this differently. Okay, there's no way to sort of mix and match in 2 different files. In other words, you can't load 2 different profiles, right? You can only load one profile at a time. So I guess to answer your question, they are not universal. They are only going to apply to the file that you saved it to. But because I'm copying the same layout, it carries over. And the thing is, it's just easier that way to do that. So does that answer your question better?
It does. It does. It makes sense.
Okay, great. Let's see, you want to go ahead and answer some of those questions there, Rick?
Well, there's only one that I see clarifying my prior question. Does the zip file you create when you do a backup store all the MFX, locos, etc. info as well? And I don't really remember. It's been so long since I've done that. MFX locomotives, I think we had an issue with that with the CS3, didn't we? I'm sorry, the CS2. It didn't. I really don't remember. It's been so long since I've done it.
Yeah, yeah.
When you're transferring data, I think it does transfer them.
Yeah, I think the other thing you may run into, folks, is that the CS2 development data or the development on the software, it may be dated at this point. They definitely don't update as frequently as they do the CS3. I don't really know what that involves, whether it's the MFX data, because even frankly with the CS3, for a lot of folks who get like quote new CS3s, they'll have MFX locomotives that are new and that aren't registering. And really we found out that those CS3s, all they need is a software update and it fixes everything. But the CS2s, although they've had a recent software update in the last year, they are definitely not as frequent as the CS3. So who knows what data transfer formats are going to hold and not hold like Rick said, again, I think the last time we touched this was the last time we actually did a transfer from a CS2 was in 2016 when the CS3 was introduced.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. I think you can take Gary and Sean off talking permission.
They're back to muted, but I don't know if I have a way to close them out of this window. Oh, let's try that. Hopefully I don't lose you, Gary. Oh no, I don't want to do that.
There we go. How's that?
No, you're fine. It's just the Zoom options mean if I remove you, I'll remove you from the chat altogether, and I don't want to do that. So
I have a lot of K83s that run my switches.
Yeah.
Will that automatically transfer to the CS3?
I think it will.
K83s, yeah. K83s will, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about the track plan because I'm going to redraw that. The one thing I'm worried about is my turntable, because I do have that set up on a memory and keyboard function. So I have a diagram where I can press track number 1 and it automatically turns to that track number 1 on my layout screen.
I believe that data will transfer over also. But again, we've had limited success with those with the CS3, so we kind of those modules are hard to get. I don't believe they're made anymore. You don't know if they're actually working when you buy them secondhand. So,
Oh, you mean the CS2s?
No, the module for the turntable, the digital control module.
Oh, the digital control model. Yeah. Yeah. It took me a while to get that one
Yeah.
figured out.
So we're kind of limited on that, on information on that, because they're not available anymore. So we haven't really played with one too much.
Okay. I'm still debating whether I want to buy one or not, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, you do.
We're patiently waiting for the new C-Track turntable to come out, and hopefully that will be more of a seamless integration into the Central Station 3.
But I don't want to redo my layout.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
A lot of people are there with you on that.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks. So Jacques, he's asking, is there an extension cable for the 60125 or 145? Yes, there should be an extension cable that's available. Do we have the part number? Give me a second. I think I can look it up. But in the meantime, Karach wants to know can you display how to do a CS3 update, Rick, while I look up the number?
Oh, I was going to look up the number while you did that, because you have your.
Why don't you look up the number and I'll show them how to do an update. All right. So Karach asks to show how to CS3 needs an update or prove. So let's see if I can do that. All right. Share. Okay. So the first thing, when you're CS3 and update information, sorry, let's get rid of this window. What's going to happen is you do need to have your CS3 connected to a router or your internet, your network. And if you're unaware of that, you have on the back of your CS3, you have the RJ45 plug. That has to be plugged into your router before you start your CS3, or you have to do a restart on your CS3. If that is live, and to prove that it's live, you would actually go into your system and you would go to, let's see, is it the network button? So not used to seeing the screen because usually it goes to the menu, but let me point it out to you really quick. Under here, you're looking for the IP number. And you can see my IP number, these numbers in this field here have to be populated. And then that's these fields here. They have to be populated. If they are not, you're not actually successfully connecting to your router, because this number means that your router has assigned an IP number and is communicating with the internet. Now, once that occurs, once you have that going, let's go back up to the top. Actually, just close this window. The first thing you will notice is you may see, and you probably will see if there's an update, you're going to see a red dot like that. Okay. And that's your warning sign that says, hey, click on me. There's an update. And you'll probably see it everywhere else here. So you're going to see a red dot here. You should see a red dot there. Probably, I think, if I remember correctly, trying to go back into draw mode, folks. I think the red dot occurs here. You'll definitely see it here instead of this green dot. The next thing that you're going to see is if you do see that red dot, you're going to see an icon right around here that looks something like that, I believe. And when you click on that, it starts your update. And most of the times these updates are two-stage updates. So once it completes and you have a green dot back here, you may actually see another red dot. I think usually it occurs on the TFP3. But anytime you see a red dot on any of these icons, that section has an update, and you also have an update icon again on that lower right section as like this. It'll be in this block right here. All right. Clear that out. I love this graphic tool.
Yeah, I haven't played with it, so I'm scared to do it live.
Even though all my drawings are like a circus clown's.
Yeah, it's still better than mine. Okay, the extension cable is 60126, and Jacques asked how many cables can you use? You know, we really don't know. There's no literature on the limit, so we don't know how many.
You could,
60126.
Let's say you can complete 10. If you need more than 10, I think you need to replan something.
Yeah, you need to invest in some wiring.
Yeah, I call the guys at Hamburg. the Marklin, the miniature Wonderland guys. They might have an answer for it. Let's see. So we answered this question. I thought by reading all the Marklin literature, CS3 is the master and CS3 plus me the slave, or is it opposite? You've checked this out one way or the other. Jim, how it works is the master slave cable is a 6-pin and a 9-pin to a 9-pin cable. It is the 6-pin side that is connected to the master, and you'll notice on the CS3, I don't believe it has a 6-pin plug. So that is definitely your slave. All right, dead airspace. Any other questions? Actually, we're coming close to the end here. Anybody have any other questions? Thank you guys all for joining us. Looks like we're well under the 100 viewer mark as far as viewers. We had 14 viewers on our YouTube channel. Again, we have a YouTube. It's streamed. It will be streamed and saved on YouTube if you guys ever have the time to review that or want to look it over again. Definitely appreciate you guys joining us. I believe our topic next month.
S88s.
Yeah, we're going to cover S88s, configuring S88s, and setting these things up.
Yeah.
And definitely appreciate you guys. Send us some. You can send emails to us and the Digital Club. Again, to join, you can go through marklin.com. And you should receive the archive of newsletters. At least, I don't know does she still send out the ones with the Tom Catherine?
No, those we've never sent out. If anybody wants those, we have those PDF format, but honestly, most of the information in there is out of date. So it's really not that relevant.
All right. 3 minutes. Last question. Who's got a question?
Yeah. Fire away. Give us a good one. Like, how do you load an old K83?
Yeah. All right.
Nothing? Nobody? Oh,
All
wait.
right. We
Gary,
appreciate
Gary has his hand up again.
Gary. All right. A lot of talk. Speak to us, Gary. Unmute your mic.
Unmute myself. Do I have to have the CS2? Does it have to be connected directly to the CS3, or can it go through a bus? Can it go through?
What are you trying to do?
Well, I want the
Oh,
CS2 on my workbench and my CS3 on my layout.
Oh, but you want the CS2 to control the layout also?
No, I want it to just be part of the system so that I can test engines and stuff instead of using a mobile station. Can I hook it to a mobile station unit under the table? I don't know what they call the one. What are they?
you're not talking about the underside ports on a CS2, are you?
No. I'm talking about the bus that goes around where you can put mobile stations on different places on your layout.
Okay. Yeah, you would use a terminal box that you can plug the CS2.
Yeah, terminal box. That's it.
Yeah, I
Will
believe
the
you need the terminal
CS2
box.
hook up to the terminal box and still work as a slave?
Okay, so that's what I was trying to get at. You're trying to have it hooked to your main layout, to your main CS3.
Right, through a terminal box.
I think so. I think it still connects to the terminal box.
Yeah, I think I saw a diagram where they showed that.
Yeah, I think it's basically what it is I believe even the 6 to 9 pin connects to the 9 pin is sort of the booster plug. And in order to expand that port, you have to use a terminal box. So the CS2, I believe, still connects to that terminal box, and you're in like Flint.
Yeah, you need that little pigtail, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we do have one. Go ahead, Rick.
Saw that item number.
I'm good, guys. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Gary. Thanks. I think it's a 60145. All right.
Wait a second. I got one more. It is a 60124 is the adapter cable, 10 to 7 pin.
Is that the short one for the mobile station?
That's a little short one, but I think you need that for the terminal for some reason. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know offhand. I don't think so, but we can always dispute that later.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for viewing. I believe that is everything. One quick, there's an explanation on the tag at the bottom of the locomotive. Robert wrote, it appears in Marklin's digital newsletter issue, volume 20 from 2008, number 5, if anybody cares to go that route.
Explanation.
I think he's talking about the serial number tags. So.
Yep.
Thanks for that. Anyways, we are at the end of our program. I appreciate you guys all showing up and listening in. I guess store up your questions for next month or send us an email to digital@marklin.com. And thank you all again for attending. Stay safe. Be sheltered. Work on your layouts. Signing off. Miss me. I see Dave.
No kidding.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right.